Thank you, Megan. So good to see everyone out this morning. It's always good to see friends and familiar faces. And as I've heard several times today, it's good to put a name with a face or a face with a name, because so many times we know a name, but we don't get to put the face there. And so it's good to have everyone out. And again, Megan has already said it, but I want to thank the Business Alliance and the PDC for all of your help in making today come together so that we can get, as she said, get some information out around, I think, a very, very important topic for our region. And so without any further words, I'm going to read the script here. To begin today's conversation, we're starting with an overview of data center development in Virginia. The panel brings together two subject matter experts who work at the intersection of site selection, infrastructure, policy, and community readiness. They'll share a practical look at how data centers are developed in the Commonwealth, what drives location decisions, and key considerations local and regional leaders should understand as this industry continues to evolve. We've got a facilitator and two panelists today, so I'm going to ask them to make their way up. The facilitator this morning is going to be Larry Jackson. He is very familiar to most of us here. He is with Hurt and Proffitt. He is one of our energy and economic development consultants. And then our two panelists are well-known individuals as well. Vince Barnett is the industry leader, data center strategic projects and lead generation for VEDP. And then we've got Chris Lloyd. He's a senior vice president and director of infrastructure and economic development with McGuire Woods Consulting. So let's give these guys a hand. Thank you. Larry?
Well, thank you, Biff. Can you hear okay? Is it good? All right, good deal. Well, welcome this morning. We're in for a treat. We've got two panelists here who have lived data centers for a long time. Rather than read their bios to you, which you can probably find somewhere else, just let you know.
Might be able to find them on the cloud, possibly. Yeah.
If you could get on the cloud right now. These two guys have grown up with data centers from the time that they have begun to come into Virginia to now. Vince is the guy that helps get data centers sited in Virginia. And then Chris is more into the policy side of it, and he represents data center developers at the General Assembly. So I think what you're going to see today is an outpouring of information for you. One of the things I want to emphasize to you is this is not intended as a sales pitch in any way. What we want to make sure is that you have the information that you need, the truthful information, not what you can read on Facebook about data centers and the good and any other information that you might want. Let's see, we should be seeing now a QR code behind me. Just to ensure that you're staying awake, we'd like you to take your phones out and scan that QR code, and that's going to get you into a Slido live poll. And you're going to have the ability to do two things in that poll. Number one is to provide any questions that you might have about data centers. Is this going to make me sound better? One is going to be to allow you to submit any questions you might have about data centers. And then the other is just to submit a word. What fear or concern are you hearing about data centers? And what it's going to do with that one word is it's going to produce a word cloud for us. And the bigger the cloud is, the more of you that have that particular word in mind. Any questions on how this is going to work? Okay. All right, we're good. Well, while we're waiting for the poll to take effect, why don't we get in with just a few softball questions? And so, gentlemen, you can handle these however you wish, but could you just start out for very basically telling us what is a data center and why do we need it?
Certainly, I will start. Microphone okay, everyone? Great. Well, good morning. It's a pleasure to be with you. I commend you all for showing this interest. The data center industry in Virginia, which is the largest market in the world, has garnered a lot of attention lately, and I'm delighted to see so many people in this region expressing some interest. So, to the question, what is a data center, and why do we need them? There's more technical terms of what they may be, but they are essentially large facilities that are storing computer equipment that are processing data or storing data that we use in our daily lives. And I think in many ways you don't recognize how often you use in your daily life data centers. So these are some folks conjure up warehousing or such, but typically fairly large buildings that have a bunch of computers in them. And when you go out to do your daily lives, whether you're doing an online work meeting, doing digital health, or logging into your child's school for some particular reason, you're likely using a data center. One interesting stat that I heard recently is the average home now. This might be shocking. I would normally ask the audience if they can to raise their hand, but there's too many of you all in here. So the average home now has upwards of 21 devices connected to the internet, which is pretty amazing. A lot of people say no way, but if you've got smart TVs, people have refrigerators, multiple phones in the house, computers in the house, and the list goes on and on, thermostats. Well, all of that data is being processed by and through data centers. So that's why we need them. It's the backbone of the modern economy is the digitization is all happening through data centers.
I think, good morning, again, Chris Lloyd, pleasure to be here. So I think Vince did a very good job of giving an overview, but I'll just give a real life example. 5 days ago, I was sitting in a hotel room in Tallinn, Estonia, and I was able to do a Zoom call with a client all around. Had clients all around the world, and I was able to access my files in McGuire Woods in Richmond while sitting in Tallinn, Estonia, all instantaneously, while I was also making travel reservations and checking stock prices. That couldn't happen 5, 10, 15 years ago, and it is driven by data centers. One thing that I might be helpful a little bit is to explain why Virginia and the history of why data centers, really Virginia emerged as a data center hub. So let's get in the Wayback Machine, and after Al Gore invented the internet, what happened was, as part of his grand architecture for inventing the internet, is there were 2 nodes of the internet that were set up. One called May East and one May West. Yes, not that May West, but it's an abbreviation. And May East is located in a parking garage in Northern Virginia, and that was one of the major nodes of the internet. And one of the first companies that developed to tap into this new technology was a company called UUNet, and they located just outside of Washington area in Ashburn area of Loudoun County, Virginia, and they tied into May East and started to build the network, what is now known as the World Wide Web or the internet. And so that then was bought by Verizon. Then America Online came on hold. Any of you who remember, every day you would get 2, 3, 4 of those CD-ROMs in the CDs in the mail for setting up AOL, and that's what happened. You just had this cluster that was then built and built and built around that. And so Virginia was the early hub of the internet, and that's why you've seen so much growth and interest in Virginia. Then we made a number of policy choices over time, which we'll talk about later, that really contributed to the explosive growth of it here in the Commonwealth.
Okay, well, let's take a pause then, and let's take a quick look at our word cloud. A lot of energy in the room. Biggest word is power, energy drain, see electric rates, energy depletion. Got some water in there. Money. There you go. Energy requirements and energy consumption. That might lead into a question, Chris, that be worth answering. How has the data center evolved, both in size and where they're located?
Sure. So I'll start. I'll reverse it with.
Okay.
Well, with size, they are obviously getting bigger. because the needs of what we do, again, as Vince noted, we've got, average household's got 21 devices connected to the internet. Just think of all the things that we do. To make sure I got here this morning, I used Google Maps to get here. That takes data. To make my hotel reservation, that takes a data center. Just think about all the activities we engage in. But the facilities are getting larger. It used to be that you could have a couple of racks in your office. Many of you who've been around for a while, you remember when the first data center storage was set up in your office, and it was just an old closet with some servers that were set in it. That doesn't cut it anymore. One, it's inefficient. If you're running a company, you don't want to be running your data center as well. So why not outsource that to someone else? So they're getting bigger in order to handle all the needs that are out there, and it's just specialized. But the locations are also becoming more widespread. So as I noted earlier, the United States started with these 2 nodes, one in San Jose, California, one in Northern Virginia. And so everything kind of clustered around them. But as data centers, not only in size are evolving, but in type they're evolving. So you have 2 types of data centers, and Vince can talk a little bit more about this. You have ones that are just storing data. Then you have ones that so you're storing data, and then people tap into it, pull data from it, data meaning stock prices, travel information, Netflix, whatever. So there's the information back and forth. So it's just essentially they're a warehouse for data. And then you have data centers, which are now doing artificial intelligence. So they're doing computation within that data center. So as the types of data centers have evolved, the networking that is required for making those happen has changed as well. So you're starting to see more of these nodes being built, not the big nodes for the internet, but you're starting to see these availability zones develop around the country and around the world. So you then are having different clusters around the country in order to handle all of this data. And the power and the fiber and the water and everything that goes along with it is what supports the ability for those to be developed.
Yeah, and I would add, so as there's been more of you will hear it referred to as AI for artificial intelligence or ML, machine learning, where it's processing the data. The May East, the nodes that Chris referenced early on, to these companies, fractions of seconds were really important. If we're watching a Netflix, Chris mentioned Netflix, you don't want to see buffering. So being close and having the incredible internet speeds were critically important of the kind of the cloud computing and the data storage, my apologies, side of things. AI has opened it up a little bit because it takes a little bit of time for that response to come back. And when we say this, we're talking seconds. We're not talking minutes or hours by any means. But it's given them the ability to locate a little further away from some of those original nodes that are out there that we've talked about, or these availability zones that have increased. So you are seeing, as a result of that, you're seeing data centers. We are seeing it in Virginia as well as others across the country are seeing it organically start to look at regions that have historically not been top of the list. So we're here in Lynchburg, so it's a prime example where maybe 10 years ago you would not have seen data centers looking this far away from where those nodes are. Today it's quite common. They're essentially chasing power. Not surprised to see the word cloud up there. Those words are quite common. Areas of interest for everyone that's interested in this ability. So that push, that transition to where we're seeing more of this AI side is actually creating more opportunities for communities and regions that otherwise would not have seen it just a decade or so ago.
If I can add one thing, though, that yes, while the technology for AI doesn't require an instantaneous, those microseconds don't matter. Wait till we go to driverless vehicles. Microseconds are going to matter then. Do you want your car connected to a data center in San Jose, California? When you're coming down when your car is driving itself and there's someone coming in your lane, do you want that signal to go to San Jose, California and come back? Or do you want it to go to a data center 2 blocks away to make sure you're not in a head-on collision? So you've got, again, all of these forces starting to converge that are requiring more ubiquitous and everywhere locations for these in order to run our modern society.
All right, you said they're getting bigger. Tell me what big is.
So I've been doing economic development for about 25 years now with the Virginia Economic Development Partnership, and I've touched a little bit of everything that we do. And I will say data centers are fascinating in that it sounds cliche to say it's a little bit of a snowflake industry. No two projects are the same, so I can't stress that enough. And every developer or hyperscaler that have their own proprietary designs and such to help with all the various things that go into a data center. All that to be said, it is quite common now for us at the state level to see minimum data center sizes from a building perspective to be 250,000 square feet or larger. I have seen them as large as 1 million square feet. And from their perspective, they don't think about it from a square foot like we would typically do. They're focused on energy consumption, so they talk about data centers in terms of megawatts. So the substations around megawatts, the utility, and I know we've got some utility friends in the room that you will hear from later today for those of you that are sticking around. But substations are currently being built to 300 megawatts increments, so it's common for us to see projects that are 300, 600, do the math and go on up. Again, as I mentioned earlier, this idea of organically pushing more rural gives us the ability to see larger sites, so it's not uncommon for us to see data center campuses that would have multiple data centers on them that are gigawatt or plus. So from a building size, 250,000 square feet I think is quite normal. From a campus perspective, it is not uncommon to see 500 acres, a gigawatt size campus.
And they're getting even bigger. Where you're seeing, we just worked on a project which is known as Project Juno, which was Stack and OpenAI and Oracle in New Mexico. That was I'm not making this number up, $165 billion project on 10,000 acres in southern New Mexico that will consume 3 gigawatts of power. To let you know how much 3 gigawatts of power is, the North Anna nuclear power plant is 900 megawatts. Just to run one campus. Think about the power and the number of, and that's millions of square feet over time, thousands of employees at one spot.
So to put that in perspective, the largest electrical customer in the Lynchburg area is 40 megawatts. And they're talking about 3,000 megawatts for one campus. Gives you a little perspective about the energy draw. Has that changed? Are they getting more efficient, I guess is a better way to ask that question.
They certainly are. So it's important to note that power is kind of the top line cost for a data center. So they are incentivized on their own to be as efficient as they can. It is their number one cost that they are contributing to. So they are becoming more efficient throughout the entire data center operation. But the capacity need, so to be clear, we're not seeing a reduction in megawatt usage. They're getting more efficient with the power that they've got, but the capacity needs are so high, so they're being efficient to where they can do more processing and utilize the same amount of power. So they are incentivized on their own from a bottom line perspective to cut costs as much as possible. These capacity demands are so high that they continue. They'll put it, and it's also worth noting that the AI processing chips and servers require a little bit more power than the standard data storage type because they're actively thinking and interacting. So we see a higher rack density per server for power, but absolutely they have technologies and have come a long way to be more efficient. I think we see a question in the back.
Well, let me ask you, before we get to that, one more thing about the efficiency. That's one of the second biggest word bubbles up here is water. Mm-hmm. Is that changing?
It is. I think you're seeing, again, the absolute growth, because it's just the capacity is so large, the absolute growth in water demand is there. But many of the facilities are now moving to air-cooled systems, and even if they are using water, many of the companies have a commitment to water reuse. So they're taking water that's coming out that's not potable, but it's treated water, and they're using that in their system. So they're reducing the draw of raw water in order to cool the systems down. So,
Yeah, and there's other technologies that are coming online. There's immersion technology where they're actually putting the servers, operating them in liquids, typically not water, but other types of coolants. On the water usage, so first reference to JLARC, which, as a reminder, Megan said the QR codes will give you 3 studies, and JLARC being one of those. That is Virginia's General Assembly, the Joint Legislative Audit Review Commission. They are kind of the auditing arm of Virginia's General Assembly. And last December, so just over a year ago, they published a very thorough report on all things data center. So the good, the bad, and the ugly. Robust, independent report. Obviously, water is one of the things that they addressed. And they found in Virginia, and again, Virginia is the largest data center market in the world by far. In Virginia, 83% of the data centers in Virginia use no more water than a large average office building. Again, the largest market in the world, 83% of our data centers use no more water than an average size to large office building.
And I'll also put it in perspective for those of you who won't be here for lunch today. I've got this statistic and what I'm going to talk about. Is data centers last year in America used 57 billion gallons of water. Sounds like a lot of water, doesn't it? Irrigating golf courses in this country used 12 trillion gallons of water. Think about that. It's either 1.2 trillion or 12 trillion. So excuse me if I'm off on one order of magnitude, but it's still exponentially more than data centers.
Yes, sir.
Certainly.
Well, rephrase the question, make sure everybody got it.
Yeah. So so the question was, how do data centers make money? Let me just go back to 21 devices connected to the internet. We are all using their services on a daily basis in our personal lives, but the economy, the industry itself, so whether it's airlines flying, communicating, the digitization of electric vehicles, batteries, just go on down the list. The need for these are so tremendous. So these folks are making money just because the need is so strong. Their list of clients are everybody. Essentially, the entire economy has a need. Whether you're, a wood processor that's building pallets or something, and you're communicating your truckloads out and where they're going to the most advanced manufacturing operation. So they make money by leasing agreements and selling the services. So they specialize in doing this. As Chris mentioned earlier, wasn't that long ago where we all had closets full of servers and we were doing this inefficiently. So these folks have taken this design, really specialized the service, how to cut cost as much as possible while providing very high-end service. Their uptimes are 5 nines plus, so they have these redundancies built in place, so there's no downtime. And for all of those various reasons, speed, certainty, availability, expertise, their client list is through the roof. So it's really just about a service that it's supply and demand. The demand is so strong that they're building this supply, and they have the ability to, and clearly with the amount of money, Chris just mentioned the New Mexico project at $165 billion. This is, again, I mentioned I've done economic development for a long time. This is the only industry that I have asked clients, can we scale that back when we go to start talking to leadership? Let's not go in so big. You set expectations and all. Let's talk about, I recognize there's a potential of $165 billion project here, but that would require everything to come into place perfectly. So let's start with the smaller side, and if we can build, we can go from there. Typically, as economic developers, you get really excited to say, oh my gosh, this is a $50 million project or whatever it may be, and those projects are amazing. A 25-job project, $50 million is Virginia's bread and butter type solution, but these are just so much bigger that it's common for me to say, hey, tell me about if all the stars don't align, you get 75%, what does that project look like? Let's start there.
I'll make it real simple. Look at your credit card statement next month. How many streaming services are you paying for? We as a family are paying for 8. I got 2 Spotify accounts because the kids can't agree on what they want. I got an Apple account. I got Netflix. I got Paramount. I got Hulu. I got HBO Max, and I'm sure there's a couple other ones. That's number one. And look at your credit card statement from 5 years ago. That didn't exist. I think there is some question with regards to AI, how some of these entities are going to make money. There's obviously a charge for ChatGPT and some of these services if you're buying their premium service, but the basic service is not. I think they're still working out the revenue model for those right now. But the core of what's driving particularly the hyperscalers, the Meta, the Microsofts, the AWSs, the Googles, they've got revenue that's coming in that's paying for it, and you're seeing it on your credit card statement.
And by the way, if you have a Visa, that credit card transaction that you're doing is flowing through Virginia most likely. One of 3 Visa data centers is located in Virginia, and I forget the number, but they do, 13 million transactions or something crazy like that per second. I probably have the stats slightly wrong, but the point is it's an incredible volume of transactions happening in a data center in Virginia every time you swipe your Visa credit card. And I only mention that because Chris said credit cards.
Yes, sir.
Oh, absolutely.
This question just came to my mind, and I'm an old electrical guy. How much energy does it require to make a Google search?
I've seen the statistics, Larry, and I can't remember it off the top of my head, and I apologize. But to do a normal Google search compared to an AI search, it is orders of magnitude different. I believe that an AI search is 6 to 7 times more intense. If you just go into Google and say, find me the directions for something, that has a relatively small amount of use. I think it's something like the amount of energy it would take to light up a Christmas tree for a minute or two. But to run, an AI search, like our kids were home from college a couple weeks ago, and unfortunately introduced my wife to artificial intelligence, and she wants to of course rearrange or get new furniture for the family room because the old sofa just isn't good enough. And so they said, well, just take a picture of our family room and let artificial intelligence redesign something for you. And I was like, stop, no, this is going to cost thousands of dollars. Don't do this. And the amount of energy that consumed was probably 6 to 7 times more than if my wife had just gone to crateandbarrel.com to look at a website. So it is significant, but I can't remember exactly.
Well, just to put it in perspective, if you're on your phone right now and you're doing a search, you're spending money. Somebody's having to pay for that. Let's just say it's 1 kilowatt hour, then you just spent 15 cents if you're an APCO customer. So it's real. And I guess my point being is that we are the ones that are creating the demand for data centers because we continue to get on. And I needed to do a presentation on another organization I'm with, and I was really struggling with how to do the outline. And our team, Brian Kosman on our team does this all the time. It actually wrote the presentation for me, 20 pages long, and all I had to do was just ask the question. And I don't know how many kilowatt hours I used right then, but somebody's paying for it. Before we move away from it, and we've got all kinds of community leaders here, and I'll echo Megan's thanks to the fact that our community leaders are here and to get the information. I'll thank you for that. But I'm going to ask you 2 questions at once, and you can answer them however you want. What are the benefits, the positives, to a community from a data center? And remember I promised this wasn't going to be a sales pitch. What are the negatives to a community of a data center?
You can play good cop and I'll play bad cop.
Fair enough. So there are numerous benefits to communities. And first and foremost, it's from a revenue perspective. So as economic developers, you're trying to diversify your economy. You're trying to bring in revenue for services that the community needs to offer. And data centers in large are significant tax generators. So they pay real estate tax on the buildings, and then they pay property tax on the equipment. So a typical, it's safe to assume that like a 250,000 square foot building this days could be $1 billion project in and of itself. Roughly about 1/3 of that would be kind of the brick and mortar, so there would be taxes gained on 1/3 of that for the building and such, and then 2/3 of that would be the server equipment and those kinds of things. So the benefits from a tax perspective are those two items, and one really important note to keep in mind: if any of you've bought a computer, by the time you get it home and take it out of the box, it's outdated. The next best chip, I often say, computers, golf clubs, and toothpaste can be innovated every year. Every year there's something better than what there was the next year. So these computers get outdated fairly quickly, and they have a refresh cycle, the data center operator. So 4, 5, 6, 7 years, the 2/3 piece of it, that equipment is turned over in its entirety. So in a $1 billion data center, every roughly 5 to 7 years, you're getting another $700 million of new equipment in, and then that depreciation schedule. I saw something about depreciation schedules on the screen is back up at 100%. So it's this constant revenue. You overlay that with the amount of services needed to support data centers versus a large manufacturing operation, generally speaking, is much smaller. So the demands on police and fire and schools, because they don't employ as much as traditional manufacturing, so you see lower demands on the communities and higher tax revenues than what you would typically say. I will say, I want to stress that the information out there about they don't create a lot of jobs, that's something that I feel is not necessarily accurate. VEDP, in collaboration with the Department of Tax, per the General Assembly, has to do a biannual study on data centers, on the data center retail sales and use tax exemption program that we have. We just completed that for years 2023 and 2024. It was published last month in December. The companies that are utilized in that particular program created over 9,000 jobs in those 2 fiscal years. And then if you add the indirect jobs with it, it was well over 21,000 jobs that are associated with data centers in those 2 years. So we're talking on averages compared to a manufacturing or some other type operation. So they do employ good jobs, but it's not at that same level, so the demands are less. So it also helps communities to again, become part of the modern economy. So you have, if you're a manufacturing community, you get a new tech company such as a data center. It's helping to diversify and bring your regional economy up to with technology. The data centers also driving innovations around renewable energies. They often bring benefits to communities such as educational or other infrastructure that's important to you. They will partner to help bring resources that is most important to communities. So top of the pyramid, it's really about revenue, so that the community leaders can do the things that they need to do within the community, but it's much more than that as well.
So I'll take the reverse of that, and that is not that there are the bad parts, but just what you need to consider. My parents raised me, and what I've tried to raise my children to do is that life's all about choices. And then I get to college, and instead of being called it choices, I was an economist by trade, I learned about the concept of opportunity cost. And that's just an issue of trade-off. And that's one of the first issues you as a local government leader or you as a business leader need to decide whether you're thinking about data centers, and that is the opportunity cost of the trade-off that takes place. If you assume that the number of electrons is fixed, that's going to be available in the network, and you assume that the amount of water that's available is fixed, then you're making a trade-off. Do you want a data center? Do you want to reserve that power and water for a data center? Or do you want to hold out for a manufacturer of some sort? Do you want to trade? Do you want something that creates good jobs, well-paying jobs, but fewer jobs than a car plant or a chemical plant or a wood manufacturing plant or a furniture plant. It's a trade-off. Do you want to allow land to be developed for data centers that consumes, again, a lot of electricity, a lot of water, or do you want to preserve that for rural areas or for hunting or for outdoor recreation? Again, the trade-off concept. That's the decision you have to make. Now, again, remember, that is based upon the concept that the resources, meaning power and water, are fixed. And I think we're on the cusp in this country and in the world of some pretty fundamental breakthroughs on energy technology, and we already talked about the water savings that are going on that may fundamentally change that calculation, that you may be able to have both. But at least for the time being, right now, you do have some fixed items on the resources side, so you do have that trade-off. The second issue as a local government you need to think about is obviously residential concerns. And that is data centers there are some data centers that are considered noisy. That's improving significantly. They do have lighting. They are secured, but people don't like to look at them. And they feel that they ruin the visual, the view shed or whatever. Again, I think a lot of that can be mitigated through buffers and other ways to protect the scenery, and that's why you're starting to see data centers on larger campuses. Instead of them being squeezed onto 10 acres of land in Loudoun County, Virginia, you're seeing them put on 500 acres with a lot of buffers. But people don't like to see, the lights and the razor wire, and, data centers need to run 24/7, and they can't be down for 1 second. So if the power does go out, they have backup generators that kick in. And when a backup generator, think about it. You've all of your businesses, many of them have a backup generator, or at your house. What happens when that backup generator kicks in? Boom! And people hear that. And that annoys them because people don't want any annoyance. So there are those visual and sound issues you do have to deal with. And I'm not saying that they're terrible. It's just you've got to think through that. And then finally, the revenue perspective. Vince talked about, and it is true, the amount of significant revenue that these data centers bring in. And that can be milk that you get very addicted to. And while it's a lot of money, and when I say a lot of money, Loudoun County alone brings in $900 million a year for data centers. It provides 25% of the county budget. It provides most of the money for the school system. They've been able to drop their real property tax rate in Loudoun County from $1.10 to 87 cents a hundred in the past few years. You're going to hear later today, Culpeper, Brian Rothmel will be here. Culpeper's real estate property tax rate is 43 cents a hundred. They are on the verge in Culpeper County of being able to pay their entire capital improvement plan for the next 30 years in cash. Spotsylvania County has so many data centers coming in that they may be able to eliminate the car tax. That's a lot of money. But the valuation of data centers can change rapidly based on that refresh cycle. So if you're building a budget based on that you think you're going to get $900 million or even $90 million or $9 million a year, and the valuation changes or depreciation or somebody delays that refresh cycle by 1 year, and you're expecting $90 million, but you only get 60, that obviously creates a huge hole in your budget. Now, again, there are smart ways to mitigate that and plan for it, and the smart communities around Virginia and around the country have reserve funds or other things to deal with that. But that is a budgeting issue you have to deal with because, again, the cycle of the refresh and the cycle of the evaluations of these do create some of those kind of bumps in the road that you have to plan for from the local government budgeting perspective. So again, they're not benefits. I mean, they're not bad things, but that can't be mitigated. But you just need to go into it with your eyes wide open on a lot of these issues.
I'm sitting here thinking, boy, I'm really glad that I'm not a local elected official. I have to make these decisions. We're getting close on time, and I do want to allow for a few other questions, but before we drop off of our planned topics, Megan mentioned that today is the first day of the 2026 General Assembly session, and given that data centers have been such a hot topic, especially in Northern Virginia, we're expecting to see some legislation introduced. I looked at about noon yesterday, and there were 13 bills had been introduced so far to address some aspect of a data center. And I asked Chris this morning, did he know a number? And he looked a little later in the evening yesterday, and we're up to 40 bills. Now, the session hasn't started, so we're still in pre-filing. What do you expect to see, Chris?
I think we'll have at least 100 bills in some way or some format that are adverse to data centers or the sales and use tax exemption or other financial benefits for data centers. That's what I expect we'll see going in.
And fair, I mean, we need to be fair about this. All 100 bills won't pass. They'll be melded together and that sort of thing.
Last year we had 65 bills and one passed, and the governor vetoed that one.
So stay tuned. This is a 60-day session, so we've got a couple of months before things will be hashed out in Richmond. But I know our local officials are especially concerned about having things dictated to them. So we'll have to wait and see what actually happens there.
But if I might, Larry, I'll just note what is happening in other states. Monday, the governor of Arizona came out and said that she wants to repeal their sales use tax exemption. You have a number of other states looking at moratoriums. I mean, this is a very active policy area all across the country.
Yeah, and so your voice is important. I think we have time for one question. And obviously, I haven't been able to look over my shoulder. What are some of the questions that you all have been seeing here that you'd like to see answered? Oh, like I'm supposed to be able to see that? Hayden? All right. Or, yeah, it might just be easier, Hayden, for me to just open up the question. Thank you, though. I appreciate it. What questions have we failed to answer that are of interest to you? Yes,
Don't
sir.
be shy. I mean, and Vince can probably add perspective asking Larry on this. I mean, what you're seeing is now, all of us are familiar with BYOB. You're now to BYOP, bring your own power. And that facility that I talked about in New Mexico, they're building their own on-site generation because New Mexico allows that. Texas allows that, kind of that behind the meter. Virginia's not quite there yet. But I wouldn't be surprised if we're going to move that direction. You're also seeing, again, whether it's small modular reactors, fusion, more efficiency in the gas network. I mean, you're going to see just the development and installation of new generation capacity, not only to replace that's being pulled off the network, but just new technologies to generate additional electrons.
Yeah, and for Virginia specific, so we hear a lot about behind the meter. We haven't actually seen significant data centers in operation with behind the meters in Virginia as of yet.
Explain what behind the meter is.
Sorry, behind the meters, the on-site generation, so where they can come in and build their own power sources and they don't need a utility partner. They're just generating their own power, serving their own facility. Conceptually, that sounds great, but as we mentioned earlier, the uptime requirements that these folks have, the hyperscalers, and that whether it be Google, Meta, AWS, you name it, or the co-location facilities that serve those and others, their uptime requirements are so high that they absolutely want grid connectivity at the end of the day. So likely what we are seeing are conversations around, you'll hear the terminology bridge and power. It may take the utility, and in Virginia, utilities, and again, you'll hear from some later, have a requirement to serve. So that requirement, they're going to need to deliver those electrons, but it could be years in the making, depending on the scale and need. So the data center community, because of everything that we've talked about from a capacity standpoint, they want power yesterday, not tomorrow, let alone today. So they're trying to solve through bridging solutions, ways to get up and running faster while the utilities are connecting to grid, and then ultimately they will transition back to grid technology. So if it's on-site generation at some point, it could conceivably be an asset that goes back to the utility. It could conceivably be used as backup generation when Chris mentioned the generators that fire up. All these things are being considered, and I think all of them will likely be solutions. But I did want to stress at the end of the day, these folks really want that close partnership with the utility.
And I'll just give one thing to put it in perspective, is when you look at the grid and the peaks, usually you have a couple of peaks in the summer when everybody throws on the air conditioner, it gets to 100 degrees, and then a couple of peaks in the winter. And when it gets very, very cold. And that's when, and then so everybody's running their air conditioner, doing the heat, and the data centers are running full as well. We just need some policies and technology to deal with that, because it can be easily mitigated. Because again, as we've talked about, all these data centers have backup generators there that can run for several hours. We just haven't gotten the policies and procedures in place that when the folks at the power company know when that peak's starting to come. They can see it coming through the system. And if they could call the data centers and say, hey, unplug for the next 6 hours and run on your generators, that would shave a lot of that peak effort off, so we're not having to buy power from out of state and drive up costs. But we just haven't had the policies and procedures catch up to that. We're looking at it, we're getting there, but some things that are smaller changes like that could have a big difference.
And there's actually a bill that was introduced that talks about demand response for data centers. So we'll see if it actually makes it through this year. Well, thank you all for coming. This has been a lot of good information. We are out of time. We're going to take a brief break before we get